Hello, everyone. So I think after Rick's talk, I think everyone just wants to go and live in a cave and never turn on their smartphone again, and because it all sounds so worrying. In 2016, I think there's something like 5.5 million devices connected to the internet every single day. This isn't going to stop anytime soon. Everyone wants Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something in every single device, whether it be their toilet, their car, their fridge, their oven, and even cities are now being connected. And as Rick, I think, pretty starkly showed, security seems to be a consideration that people are having after they've built all these things. So what I want to ask is there a way to solve this problem, or are we going to have a major catastrophe first before people really begin to realize that there's something worrying or some big problem out there? Mike, can I ask you to address that first?
I go out and I meet customers probably every week, and this is in a business environment, and their systems aren't protected, and their hospitals, their financial institutions, they're right across the board, and they haven't got those systems protected. So on the Internet of Things, where these systems are coming from so many different manufacturers, as Rick said, with no standards at all, I can't see how there is an easy fix to this in any way, shape or form. In a normal world, we would harden systems, we would tier support, structured access to those systems. We would put just the systems that we want, able to see what they're allowed to see. But in the Internet of Things, we seem to believe that everything should be able to talk to everything. And the problem is just getting exacerbated.
And Sheila, you kind of said that from, I suppose, looking at it from another point of view, beyond just the fact that the security here is non-existent for a large part, there's the issue of the amount of data that we're collecting and the amount of data from dozens of devices that people have in their lives now, whether it be an Alexa speaker or their smartphone, their laptop, and the amount of data that is creating on each individual person. And there's a huge problem there as well from a privacy point of view.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm thrilled. And Rick, I loved your prior talk. And you brought up an important topic, and that is privacy. And I want to tease apart two things. The security, keeping data secure and invulnerable from external attack or unauthorized access, and this privacy idea, which is really about the collection and the use of data. Is it used for things that benefit us as a consumer, or is it used for things that may not benefit us, may harm us, may create a physical harm, financial harm, social harm, embarrassment? So we really need to think about the two and come at them from a very solution-oriented perspective. Now, I also like what Rick said about the acceleration. Every company is trying to be competitive, trying to be agile. They need data. They're all in transformation to become data-driven. And the idea is if they can collect a lot and use a lot of data, they can optimize the experience of their customers. So massive amount of data, and this means we need a methodology where brands that are using data can begin to design in the security and the privacy concerns and shift the accountability from the consumer to the brand, where the brand begins to take full responsibility for making sure there's benefit and not harm.
Can I ask you on that point then, if you're saying that it's the responsibility of the brands, where's the pressure going to come from? Is it going to come from the consumers who are they going to become aware of the problem of all this data being collected, or is it going to come from regulatory bodies who are going to, from the top down, who are going to put pressure on companies to make sure that they're using the data responsibly?
Well, I'll say this. I think it's coming from everywhere. I think consumers basically want to be able to trust the brands they engage in. And you think about trust. That's really the key word. Trust is the foundation of every human relationship. It's my relationship with my kids. It's my relationship with my boss. and it's my relationship with the brands I choose. If they break my trust, I may not come back, right? If I trust them a lot and they make a misstep, I might give them a chance to explain. But that's really the underpinning value. And I think that brands want to maintain the trust and they want to be responsible. The good actors do. So we'll get pressure from consumers, pressure from regulators, but those two audiences cannot do it alone. The brands have to take responsibility, and I think they want to. They just need a methodology.
But just to pick you up on that, the brands getting pressure from consumers suggests that consumers are aware of all the data that's being collected on them. But for a large part, I suspect that's not true, especially in the world where we have smart fridges, smart toasters, smart kettles, where people just think, oh, it's a cute idea, but there's information being collected there all the time. And people just aren't aware of that. So how could the consumers put pressure on brands if they just don't even know that they're
I think it's twofold, right?
I
think sometimes people are not aware that data is being collected, as you said. Most of the time, people just don't give a shit if data is being collected or not. They don't see any value in those discrete data items. They're like, oh, why should I care if anyone knows what's in my fridge? But the value is not in the discrete data item. The value is in the aggregation of data, the big data aspect of it, the being able to mine it and draw contextual conclusions out of that big bulk of data, where you can then begin to influence, if you're a supermarket, for example, the buying behavior of those individuals. So I think there's a lot of education to do, and it's not technical education. It's not about teaching people to ask security professional questions. It's about teaching people the value of data. And the fact that they need to pay attention to what's being collected and how. The other point I was going to bring up, I see you waving your pen.
Sure. Sorry, it's
rubbish. But the other thing I wanted to say, because it'll get lost and it was relevant to something that was said before, we talk a lot about what's the value of information collection to us as consumers, to brands, and how do we benefit from it, hopefully mutually. What gets quite often neglected, but obviously I have to think about in my role, is what's the value of information collection to criminals? And how quickly are we beginning to see online crime being big data driven? This stuff is already happening. There are already large aggregated databases of stolen information which are used to build more credible and more effective attacks. If you just think of some of the recent stuff and aggregate it and think, oh, what could I do with that? LinkedIn, put that together with, so LinkedIn, that's a lot of professional information and as well as passwords and identity. Put that together with, let's say, Adobe. That was quite a big one as well. Anyone who's ever installed and registered Acrobat Reader. And maybe put that together with Ashley Madison, so you get some sexual activity in there as well. Think about how you can begin to target and manipulate attacks to become more credible and more successful. Factor in all of the commercial information that's now being mined and stored and collected. We're opening ourselves up to a world of hurt, without doubt.
So the issue that Rick raises is a security issue. This is the unauthorized access or the theft of data, and then using very modern, advanced, AI and machine learning techniques to data mine and then target people. But the first point is when you're doing in an operation and you're shifting the accountability to enterprise, we need to really pull on that security thread and make sure that your security is quite advanced. Otherwise, it is very profitable and it's very provocative and very exciting to the bad guys. From an enterprise perspective, and that's what my company does, we enable the data, and we do data mining, and we do data brokering, and we do data collection, and we do data harnessing, and we apply machine learning and very, very advanced data science so that brands can connect better with their customer. Even there, with this, the guy that invented Proteus, the first government-approved sensor-embedded med, Dr. George Savage, a very dear friend of mine, and George and I did a couple of years ago, and we're going to reprise this prezzo in April. George took the med, and then on a screen it showed when he swallowed it, there's a little thin layer between a filament of magnesium and a filament of copper, and when he swallowed it, and that little barrier dissolved and they touched, the body's electricity began transmitting, and it captured that the med had been ingested, that it was being uptaken, and then it transmitted via body electricity to a little wearable that had an accelerometer, which is like a gyroscope here, as well as monitoring blood pressure, heart rate, body temperature, respiration, etc. The point being is that data is everywhere, and I love the point you made. We as consumers, we want convenience, we want ease. I mean, how many of us have a smartphone in our pocket, right? How many of us have begun to get internet-enabled devices in the home, smart devices? How many of us sleep in a smart bed or wear a smart bra? I have the OWN bra, which is the first edition that is sensor-enabled. And you know what's coming and I'm super excited about? It's going to have sensors on it that read my sweat and the enzymes in my sweat, and I'll have early cancer detection.
You know what I'm really excited about, and I got a mail about it just the other day. It's brilliant, the first smart hairbrush.
Yeah.
True.
What does a smart hairbrush do?
It monitors how you brush your hair, how it breaks, and whether you need to put some more conditioner on it or something. I'm not really going to buy it, but it is real.
It's the whole area of that you're talking about health there is fascinating. I know, Mike, you said that you deal with hospitals, and increasingly in healthcare, everyone wants access to data. There's remote doctors, there's robo-doctors. We've seen that pacemakers that have been fitted previously are liable to be hacked as well as anything else. Yeah. This is kind of life and death stuff. This isn't just your toaster getting hacked and becoming part of a botnet to be attacking someone's website. This is really, when you escalate it to the kind of degree that we've seen, it's life and death. And how have you seen people in these areas that you deal with? Are they really grasping the scale of the problem?
I won't name the hospitals I've met, but I've met hospitals that have a firewall in front of their patient care records, a firewall in front of radiography departments, a firewall in front of 10-year-old switching gear that's completely flat. And so the Internet of Things for me is just even more scary than the business world that I live in. And I've got sort of a thought that if something's intelligent, it runs an operating system and it runs an app, some sort of application. And if something's networked, it can be compromised. Just as a loose comment out there, but one that I believe, actually. And then when you do have something that can be compromised, how do you patch it? Because it's out in the wild now. There's no manufacturer controls out there that make it go back to a well-known IP address to bring it back up to speed and to fix any problems. And I think I heard from your presentation how many billions of devices were out there. It's just such an enormous problem.
We just released 2 reports at RSA yesterday from our forward threat research team about exposed infrastructure and smart cities. And it's the sheer scale of what is quite simply openly exposed with no encryption, no authentication, and very little monitoring in a city infrastructure. This was US only. We did a lot of research using the search engine Shodan to find this infrastructure. If you're interested in reading the reports, you can go download them on trendmicro.com. But it's the scale of what's already out there is staggering. So I think the important lesson is not only secure your shit, but it's also to remember that we're not only talking about technology of the future, we're talking about all of the legacy technology which has become either internet connected or software enabled or software defined. These are all buzzwords now. A couple of years ago we did some research into AIS, not the operating system, the AIS, the ship-to-shore radio communication protocol. And as radio has become software defined, a lot of these things that were originally designed to be over the air, over the radio waves, are now traveling over the wire or over the air and wireless, but using standard internet protocols. And we found that with AIS, there's no security built into that protocol at all, and we could start injecting data into that stream, and we could make an oil tanker appear in the middle of a lake. We could cause a ship to change course. We could fake a man in the water alert, so somebody probably would try and go and rescue this person that didn't exist. And the scariest thing that we found also is that we could switch the transponder frequency that the ship was using to communicate with the shore, which is something that only the shore can do and the captain of the vessel can't undo. So we could basically change the course of a vessel and then render it incommunicado, and then of course you go and board and hijack that ship. We already know that Somali pirates use AIS data to go and choose what's on the menu for today. So imagine the case if they begin to start using the vulnerabilities as well. So even things that you totally don't expect, like ship hijacking, becomes digitally enabled. So it's not just about the future, it's a lot about the legacy stuff too.
I think that's a problem in that companies have been making these devices that can connect to the internet for years, and until, I guess, the last couple of years, security was definitely the last thing on their mind. Even now, security is the last thing on most companies' minds that are making, because firstly, the consumer wants things that just work, that connect without having to set up passwords, anything like that, and are cheap. And so you get companies who have no consideration for security, pumping products out onto the market that are just completely vulnerable. And there's absolutely no reason why they're going to change that. So is there any hope that we're going to see in the next 5 years an improvement in the current security situation?
One of the things that we've done at Trend Micro, because obviously we're HQ'd in Japan, so we're a very, very big brand. It's like up there with Toyota.
You're big in Japan.
We are big in Japan. I'm not going to sing. So one of the things that we've done is work with the auto manufacturers in Japan, because obviously there are some big global car manufacturers based out of Japan. Because smart cars are becoming the norm, connected cars are becoming the norm. If you steal my mobile phone, you can go and find out where my car is and whether it's locked or not just by looking at an app on my phone and so on. And what we've done with those manufacturers is begin to work with them, and we've supplied them with an SDK so that they have a security toolkit which they can just pick up and use as they go on to develop their customer-facing devices and equipment. And we need more players to start getting involved at that level, saying, hey, we're the security expert, you're the car expert, you need help, here's an SDK, here's a way that you can just get on with it.
Sheila, do you see any move in that direction? Do you think companies are even beginning to think like that and think about how, at the other end, they're processing the data?
What we're seeing is a trend towards this idea of data governance and a master data strategy. You think about the brands that we work with, and this is when we design their data use, we're talking to them about, instead of bolt-on security and bolt-on privacy, or privacy and security after the fact, after you have an issue or a failure, you get in trouble, really doing it at the design layer with an ethical data use approach, a methodology. And the one I keep hearing about, and it's an actual model called the Effective Data Protection Governance Model. And it, at the design phase and then through development and then before you go to production and then a monitoring loop, you ask all the right questions. It's a framework to design against that pulls in not just the security piece, whatever your perimeter and your intrusion detection, the layered security approach, but also it plans for the eventual use of the data and the impact to the individual. And this is the method that allows a brand to begin thinking about not designing with the brand's benefit at the center, but really putting the consumer at the center for impact, so that when we as consumers, we're lazy and we just want to turn stuff on and it work. So when that happens, the brand has made themselves accountable, and the use of the data it accrues to the consumer benefit and then the brands.
Is that happening though?
Yes,
are
it
brands
is.
beginning
Yeah,
to think like that?
absolutely it is. This is a conversation I've been having actually yesterday with the Irish Data Protection Authority, Commissioner Dixon. This is a conversation we're talking to the regulators about and to all the big brands about. Big push in Europe because of GDPR and the e-privacy regulation. These are things, the e-privacy regulation is in effect, right? But it's being updated and changed. And e-privacy reg will take into account all of the Internet of Things, all of the machine, all the bits and bytes and beacons, the listening beacons in our smart cars, the retinal fatigue sensors in our smart cars, the sensors in our seats that can detect if we're about to have a heart attack and nav the car over to the side of the road. All that technology is going to be implicated under e-privacy reg. So ensuring that we, as business operators here in the EU, are ready for that. We are aggressively engaging with not just the regulators, but also the brands, this idea, and we're an enabler, we're a processor, of bringing it into the design layer so that at the architectural schematic, in the functionality you've programmed in and you've accounted for the security pieces. I want to raise one issue, and I think we need to actually touch on this, and this is the healthcare space. The big evolution in all of our consumer lives. What's really about to happen is there's going to be a dramatic transformation in health. I mean, how many people have a Fitbit or some bio device that monitors our health and tracks us in some way? Right? Popular, fantastic. I've got a guy, one of my top attorneys on my team, that has worn his bio device and tracked every run that he's made for the last 5 years, and every heartbeat, how his body performs after meals, what meals. I mean, the guy's a fiend, right? Massive data that is he's monitoring his health. But what if it got cracked and hacked? You know, and it will be combined with massive other data in the marketplace. That kind of data, in U.S. terms, we have a law that governs all health diagnostic data. So if I go to a doctor, but that kind of data, which we call, in the U.S., we call health interest data, is not regulated except by the device provider's privacy policy.
And you know what, the funny thing is a lot of people think about data like Fitbit data and stuff, and they go, well, why do I care who knows what my heart rate was? I mean, that kind of data surely is harmless. What time of day my heart was beating faster and when it was beating slower. But it's not, like I said before, it's not the discrete items of data. You just have to expand the envelope a little bit and think, well, if I have access to more information, maybe even something as simple as your browsing history, and I can tie in a time of day when you were reading a certain news article and your heart rate went up, then I know the kind of things that gets your brain ticking, that gets you more excited. Then I know the kind of things that I have to feed you to make you act in the way that I want you to act. So discrete items of data, fine, but it's the power of being able to mine it and
absolutely.
aggregate.
I'll give you one example to bring that to life, and this is a solution we've put in for one of our retail brands. When you walk into the store, retail store, brick and mortar, your smart device is detected, and then you're tracked through the store. And when you go to a display and you look at the display, they've got cameras that, you know, faces are math and emotions are math, right? And they can track your reaction, your facial reactions to that. If you're wearing a Fitbit or equivalent, that is also triangulated with your smart device, so they can pick up on an increase in respiration. And they got me at the shoe department, and then I make my way over to, let's say, the cosmetic department, and I buy, I don't know, lipstick or whatever. They know that my upsell is those shoes, that I had a facial expression that, registered joy and glee, and my heart rate increased because I liked them so much. So that's and we're doing this today, or not we, but we've implemented that for a retail brand. Very simple marketing example of trying to figure out what the consumer is going to want. Where it gets dicey is the use of that data for things that may harm me. Right? If you're going to use that data and you're going to go a bridge too far,
or even that you don't consent to, right? Whether there's harm involved or not.
And we could really tackle the consent issue, because consumers are inert and they don't want to be presented with a NASA-like space station control panel of every nuanced potential use of their data. They simply don't care. They want to be able to trust a brand, and this is my point. We've got to, as brand users of data, as the good guys, we've got to police ourselves, we've got to be accountable, and we've got to get the social norm right. What I can stand up for a brand in the United States is very different than what I can stand up in Canada, and very different than what I stand up in UK or France or Germany, which we operate in the EU.
So, from what you're talking about, we kind of, as a society, I think, we need to begin to care more about our data, because we have to get beyond just looking at it as points of data about our heartbeat or whatever. As Rich said, we have to look at it as an aggregate. Can I ask each of you finally, what do you think it's going to take before that kind of dawns on people in general? Do you think it's going to take some sort of catastrophic data breach? Is it going to take something where someone's connected device ends up killing them? Is it going to, how are we going to get to that point where people are aware, let's say, of just how powerful all this data is?
I think people are going to start to see it coming through on every form you fill in online, particularly in Europe. Every form you fill on online, they've got to ask you why they are gathering that information and what purpose they're going to use it for. The GDPR is going to be very, very onerous on people that collect data. It doesn't do home use, I'm afraid. It doesn't do domestic use. But you will see it coming through because they have to, and data they hold on you, who owns it, who accesses it. You have the right for a subject access request to take that data. And if you're not doing repeated ones, that's free of charge now. So it really is changing the way that privacy is from businesses holding consumer data. And I'm quite worried for you in the US. If you're gathering all that personally identifiable information...
We're gathering it in the EU as well. We're doing it in China.
Yeah, and you gather it on Europeans, then you're going to have to retrospectively get the consent for that data or remove that data.
Well, I'm going to say this. I think that we are accelerating so quickly, and the data collections, and there's really two kinds of data: actively collected, where I fill out a form or provide data about myself, and then the passively collected observational data, where I'm observed as a consumer. All the apps on your smart device, all your internet-enabled devices in your home, your smart car, etc. That observational data is exponentially expanding, and there's no way to practically get consents for all of the uses, the joinings, the sharings. I think there needs to be a better answer, and I think there is. And if we had time to really start parsing the GDPR, which is a really strong new law for Europe, and look at the consent piece, but also look at something inside that body of law called legitimate interest and the balancing test. And in that law, there's a provision for companies to begin doing something called the ethical use of data, where you do it at the design layer, you address the security pieces, and you ensure that the use of the data is ethical. And we're accelerating to the point we're going to have to come up. It's not simple consent anymore. It's not enough.
And it's not, the GDPR is not simple consent. It's transparently saying why you're gathering that data and what use it's going to be used for.
The question was, what's it going to take?
Yeah.
Right, for us to realize and to react as consumers and individuals. I think it's already happening. I think the thing that it's going to take is already occurring. The thing that we as individuals like least, or certainly dislike intensely, is feeling like we're being used, feeling like we're being manipulated. We are waking up to the fact that we are being used and we are being manipulated. We're seeing propaganda being exposed. We're seeing fake news actually for what it is now. We're believing less in it as it gets more exposed. And we're realizing that without information about us as individuals, this manipulation becomes much less effective. The more that manipulation happens, the more society is going to push back and kick back, and the more we're going to guard more closely our own private information, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay. So maybe don't throw away your smartphones just quite yet. There is hope.
I think we have to get at our social value. I think we are at an inflection point in our collective human experience. And we do. I think this is absolutely true. We have this innate sense of fairness. And so all uses of data, we need to agree, are fair and react to the ones that seem or feel unfair. It's about social norming and about what we as humans believe is ethical, is legal, just, and fair.
All right.
And if you do throw away your smartphone, dispose of it responsibly.
Mike, Sheila, Rick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.